Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is James Stewart, also known as Mickey James. Today, after much consideration and reflection, I've decided it is time to move forward with the project of telling the story of my life in San Francisco. For years, I was ashamed to tell anyone how I got to be where I am. But now, at the age of 56, I'm too old to care. It is my sincere desire and hope that I can inform the naive about homelessness, and I can perhaps help someone avoid becoming homeless. So let me give you some context. Before coming to San Francisco, I had never seen how homeless people live. I had never seen gay people, gay activities. I didn't know what a drag queen was, what queer was. I didn't know what the word, they used to call me, square. I didn't know what a square was. I had never heard of mental illness. And I did not know that there were nonprofit businesses that were contracted with the city to service or provide services to people that were unhoused. The sun was shining on a December morning in Oakland. I was being evicted and I had put all my belongings out of the apartment, left it open for the manager with the key in the door. I had packed 2 duffel bags of my essentials, mounted a bicycle, and went to the subway to ride from Oakland to San Francisco. I'm hoping that I'm going to find some work and stabilize my housing. When I come up out of this subway, I'm on Market Street, somewhere between 5th and Embarcadero. It's cloudy, it's gray, it's windy, kind of chilly, totally different from what's going on in Oakland at the exact same time. Alright, so I asked a stranger how to get to Golden Gate Park, because when I had a car, I used to drive across the bridge with my friends, and we would drive through Golden Gate Park to get to the beach. So that was the only place I really knew where to go. I get to the park with my bike and my duffel bags, and I see homeless encampments hidden in the bushes and in the trees all over the park. And there was a lot of abandoned encampments that you could see still had a tent that was, left discarded or taken apart. So for 2 days, 2 nights, I found myself my own little spot. But I had to stay there. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't really leave my stuff behind and go too far away because somebody might steal my stuff. I did not sleep at all. At nighttime, they had raccoons in that park the size of dogs that were growling, and you just knew they wasn't scared of humans. And then there was just the general fear of having an encounter with a stranger, a predator, pervert, whatever. So that was very stressful, And I think it was the second or third day, another homeless person had told me about the Human Services Department applying for general assistance and getting a voucher to stay in a shelter. I did not know what a shelter was. So I had to come back towards the Tenderloin area near the subway. And I'm on 8th and Mission because I've already applied for general assistance, got the food stamp award, and so I'm giving directions to this shelter called Episcopal Sanctuary. It was the first shelter I had ever been in, ever. And the men were separated from the women in the shelter. Every morning at 7 a.m., staff members would tell everyone you had to leave. And you had to sign up on a lottery to be called at 6 p.m. So when my name wasn't called, then I had to stand in another line for an hour to wait to be given a foam mattress and a blanket on the floor in the basement somewhere. So after playing the lottery for 2 weeks, I was informed that I could earn a cot to sleep in if I volunteered as a volunteer janitor assistant. And, I could earn basically a bed every night. The first of the month was about a week away, and many of the people I met said that they were going to go rent a hotel room, go stay with some friends, and never come back. And on the first, the shelter was about 60% full compared to what it was before. Food was great, lots of food. The shelter was warm, and the volunteering gave me access to a bunk bed in a room about the size of a closet, so I had a roommate. The bathroom and shower area were horrible. I'm talking rust everywhere. The faucets either were broken, half working, covered with so much filth you had to resist the urge to vomit up in there. The staff was like a mixed group of ethnicities, and everybody had this sad, sullen, bored look on their face when they would talk. And I remember the black workers being the meanest. I mean, they were condescending, sarcastic, vague, and they would express delight that they didn't have to live in a shelter, and they would mock us and shame us anytime they could about putting ourselves in the situation, and that was very frustrating. I didn't know that black people acted like this. While living in this shelter, I heard many conversations about fraud. People would come in and talk about how much money they made panhandling, how they got over it, how much they were able to steal from a store. And they would explain how they would put on their disguises and, push a wheelchair 5 blocks and sit in the wheelchair for a few hours, shaking cups with pennies in them at people and keeping the dollars in their pockets while they look like they have nothing. And then they would brag about how much money they were making. They say they would make $50 in an hour or $100 like in 4 hours of just sitting and begging for money. And you had aggressive panhandlers who would stand in front of convenience stores or fast food restaurants or ATMs and keep asking for a specific amount of spare change over and over like a broken record robot. I mean, it was a mess. Some panhandlers would walk out of the shelter normally on 2 legs, and within a block of their hustle, they'd start limping and be bent over with a cane or one of those things that people, I can't think of the name right now, but it was a lot of different hustles that they seemed to have to get over on someone who thought they were helping them, honestly buy food or something. On or about the 5th of the month, I would see these familiar faces return. And there was really no clear explanation given to why they were coming back. Just a lot of angry ranting about who stole something from them, who lied. So the shelter offered 30-day beds to those that were regularly seen an employment specialist. So I was able to make a resume, attend a job fair, get hired working at an electronics store. After drawing a portrait of my employment specialist, she recommended that I draw a portrait of Mayor Willie Brown and present it to him with my resume. I did that. 2 weeks later, I got a recommendation letter from the mayor. So I had made my first business contact. All right, so with my second paycheck from this job at this electronics store, I bought a digital keyboard. Okay, and something like this right here. Okay, only this one is just a MIDI keyboard controller. The one I had a drum machine in it, and you could program different parts of the drum pad to accompany whatever you were playing, and you could record yourself. And so I would go down to the subway and put a plastic cup in front of me, sit cross-legged on the ground with my back to the wall, and I'd have this keyboard on my lap, and I would just play my own compositions. I didn't know how to read music. I just knew how to kind of remember what songs that my parents used to listen to and play them on the board. And I met some street musicians who introduced me to the life of busking. I met future musicians I would actually perform with on paid gigs. Now at this shelter, I had a roomie. I had a bunkie, and he was like about 10, 15 years older than me, right? And we looked out for each other's stuff. One person was not in the bunk. Someone was always in our area because we didn't want our stuff to get stolen. It's another thing. When you're homeless, you really gotta watch your stuff because there's other homeless people there that are always looking to steal. That's how my bike eventually got stolen, even though it was locked up outside to a chain link fence. Every day a piece of my bike was missing until there was nothing but a frame. So anyway, my bunkie, I kind of regarded him as an older brother, you know what I'm saying? And he had this back east kind of way of talking, and he talked like a person that had been to college and had some culture about it, some savoir faire. He knew about Broadway plays and movies with Sidney Poitier and whatnot, right? And he knew I liked to play the piano because I always had the piano. So he would take me to these hotels like the Fairmonts, the Regencies, the Marquis, these big fancy tourist hotels that had these grand pianos in them that you could play. You could just jump on them and play them if you knew what you was doing. And this was before 9/11, when you could just walk up into any of these tourist attractions and go wherever you wanted. So sometimes we would leave the shelter, or I'd leave the shelter by myself, go to these hotels. I'd go up inside conference rooms and load up on the food that was left behind at the buffet table. Go sit down, start playing the piano. Staff members would come around, give me water, juice, or whatever. So I really felt appreciated, felt like I knew, I was home somewhere. Eventually, I had to stop associating with my roommate because one night this fool took me to dinner somewhere and started talking to me about having romantic feelings for me, and I was like, no, I was stuck. I was disgusted, and I told him, I said, no, man, it ain't nothing like that going on at all. I said, you my brother, and that's just how it's always going to be between us. I didn't see none of this coming, right? And so he took it cool, you know what I'm saying? He kind of laughed about it and everything. And then maybe a day or so later, man, I was just so irritated that he had dropped that on me that I got in a fight with somebody in the shelter because they didn't wash their hands, after they used the bathroom. And even though I felt like it was self-defense, witnesses said that I was the one that threw the first punch. And then I quit working at the electronics store because I was bouncing from shelter to shelter and I couldn't afford stable housing. The city had shelters, and then nonprofit organizations had shelters. My favorite was the Salvation Army shelter because once you entered the shelter, you had to put your belongings in storage. You had to take a shower. They gave you clean pajamas and underwear and socks. And they fed you till you was full. And then you had the choice of you could stay up and listen to a sermon or you could just go to sleep. And it was very peaceful, our Salvation Army. The people that worked there were not black. They were like missionary folks, and they were very professional, very nice. Shelter life introduced me to homeless prostitutes, women who use sperm donations to get welfare. Now, I was popular in the shelters because whenever clothes were being given away, I always chose slacks, button-down shirts, loafers, dress shoes, blazers, overcoats, and trench coats. I bathed every day, and I was flattered by the attention I was getting and intrigued with the arrogance and willingness these women had to reveal things about themselves that were not honorable, however that's pronounced. They had similar stories, of being molested and liking it, getting caught, enjoying it, getting paid for it. My mind was blown because these were not the typical victim stories I was accustomed to hearing about on television and in movies. And their careers as prostitutes pretty much seemed to start in middle school. And a lot of times they were high school dropouts or they never went to high school at all. Their narcotics use began as early as 11 years old, where they would be turned out, maybe by a family member. Their life as lesbians would start in school where they were turned out by a classmate. And I would ask them why they didn't tell their parents, or I would say, did you tell your parents? They would say no. I would say why? And they would say that they was afraid their parents were going to blame them for being flirtatious. They would run away from strict religious parents. They would run away from addicted, abusive, neglectful parents. They would run away from foster care. And they would go stay with people that use narcotics and alcohol because they were already drinking alcohol and using narcotics before they ran away. So they knew who in the neighborhood or in that city they could go to get drugs and alcohol. And they were already having boyfriends and sexual relationships with folks in exchange for drugs and alcohol. And sometimes they will hook up with a guy who has a car, maybe he has an apartment, or he's living hotel to hotel. And either he tells them they gotta start prostituting themselves, or they decide to volunteer themselves as a prostitute because while they're a runaway, they're getting a lot of attention from men. And so it's common for a young girl, happened to me, just out the blue, say, hey, I know some guys that say they'll give me X amount of dollars for this, and then we'll be able to use it to go do this. And so, they got these boyfriends, these cars. The boyfriends might be drug dealers, and they living in hotel to hotel, traveling to tourist destinations like Las Vegas, Atlanta City, or whatever. And women would either turn tricks on the street or, go work in a strip club dancing. Eventually, the boyfriends get arrested for pimping and pandering, or selling narcotics, or some kind of violence. And then these girls, they have to go to the street and prostitute themselves by themselves with no protection from the perverts, the rapists, and the aggressive pimps. And then sometimes they would choose a pimp. They just walk up to a pimp and open up their purse and let him take whatever money's in it. And in exchange, he would make sure they're always in a hotel room. He'd make sure their laundry get done. He'd make sure they don't have to sign anything. He handles all the money. They go make the money, and what he does is he goes and rents the room, keeps gas in the car, make sure they always got dope at the house when they come home, make sure that they bathe, so on, all that stuff. Now in the shelter, you don't see the prostitutes that you see on television in the movies. These prostitutes might be overweight, oddly shaped, physically disabled, okay? And almost all of them have lost custody of their children due to narcotics use. They might have felonies on their record, been diagnosed with a mental disorder due to trauma and their drug addiction. They call it bipolar dual diagnosis. And if they're not getting pregnant, they're receiving Social Security or applying for Social Security benefits while receiving like general assistance from the city, which absolves them from looking for a job. Of course, being pregnant or receiving welfare for having a child also relieves one from the pressure of looking for a job. So the last shelter I stayed in was a large empty warehouse near what is now Oracle Park in San Francisco. This shelter held approximately 600 males and 300 females. Every day I would wake at 5 a.m. and catch a bus to an agency to wait for my name to get called for day labor work. Some days I would have to wait like 6 a.m. until the afternoon before heading back to the shelter with nothing. So on one occasion I was given an assignment to work in a warehouse for a plastics retailer. And I learned how to use a forklift to handle these large pallets of sheets of plexiglass, high density polyethylene, okay, plexiglass that goes on the buildings and such. And Regal Plastics was my first day job in San Francisco. I was hired full time. I agreed to not tell the agency that he hired me. And it was cool working there. I got to make deliveries in the delivery truck. Full-time play, full benefits. My life was finally going somewhere after 2 years of homelessness. I used to take my keyboard to work because I didn't have lockers at the shelter. And it just wasn't worth it to leave it there. One day, my coworker saw me walking to work with his keyboard, and he asked me enough questions to where I finally confided to him. I said, "Look, man, I live in a homeless shelter, and I don't want anybody to know." He looked at me, shook my hand, and he said, "Now I trust you." Now, while I'm living at this homeless shelter, I fall in love with a woman who was very nice to me. Okay? I love the sound of her voice when she would call me by my name. Now, when I met her, I was aware that she smoked cigarettes and she smoked weed. Because I smoked cigarettes and weed with some of her associates. And so, the first time we were ever alone together somewhere, she said, quote, "I want a nickel." And it took me about 10 seconds of being silent and dumbfounded to realize that was her way of saying she wanted some narcotics. she thought it was funny. So I would go to work, come back to the shelter, hang out with her. We would take walks down by the water, smoking weed, talking, and we would share drugs, food, And I had a girlfriend at the time who was cheating on her boyfriend. And one day, this girl, she was mad at her boyfriend and mad at me, having a temper tantrum, threw a chair at me. I ducked, and my wife, my soon-to-be wife, grabbed me by the arm, took me away, said, "Come with me." And after that, we was inseparable. I married her, took her to Reno, married her, came back home. It was the best 2 weeks of my life with my wife, right? Because I had moved us into a hotel that I could pay month to month on. And so that was cool. We used to go to Chinatown and we was having a great time. And then one day I get paid and she decides to ask me if she could have some money to go buy some crack. And I was hesitant, but I told her, I said, if you can do this and not tweak out to the point that we can't even communicate or do the fun things we do together, then I'm cool. So we got weed, she went and got some weed, she went and got some beer, I went and got the movies, music entertainment, and for the first time ever, I watched a person prepare dope to smoke. And I remember the smell was disgusting. It was like biohazard in a hospital. And she lit her pipe and her neck started moving like this, like she was listening to jazz music. And then her face took on the appearance of a person with Down syndrome. And I was like, ooh, what is this? And then she was like looking around the room, searching for stuff on the floor that I couldn't see. And picking up small pieces of paper that looked like something small was inside of them. And I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. You know what I'm saying? I forgot what movie was playing. I asked her, "Are you alright?" And she starts hyperventilating, struggling to talk. I open the windows and the doors. She closes the windows and the doors. And her tongue was hanging out of her mouth. I would call her name. She was struggling to talk. And so I finally just said, "You scaring me. You don't tell me what's going on with you. I'm calling the paramedics to come look at you." Then I heard the most masculine, angry voice come out of her mouth. She said, "Don't do that." Bro, I was petrified. I said, I'm not going to sit in a room with a person who's having an experience that takes them away from reality and me. You can always call this place home, but you're not going to do this weird stuff when I'm here. So tonight, you can go stay with your sister or your mom. She leaves. A few weeks later, she returns. While I'm getting off work, we make up, we make love. Then in the morning, she starts an argument with me, accusing me of sleeping with the secretary at work. And I'm like, I remind her, I said, wait a minute, bitch, you've been gone for 3 weeks. All I do is go home and sit here and wait for you to come home. This becomes a cycle. And I eventually tell her, I say, there's no need to put on no act in the morning. Just go on about your way. We know what you're going to do. You're going to be gone for a few weeks and you're going to come back. So one Christmas Eve, my ex-wife comes home drunk and she pees on herself and on the floor. And she's a total mess. She's talking to herself, talking to people that I can't see, and going through these emotional swings. And I run some bath water. I bathe her like a parent bathes a child. And I noticed that her wedding ring ain't on her finger no more. And I asked her, what happened to your ring? And she gonna tell me that she had to sell it for some food. I heard this and I said, okay, yeah, wait, this is insane. And so I help her put on some clean clothes, and I walk her to the bus stop, and I tell her, when you get to your mama's house, call me and let me know that you got there. A week later, at work, the secretary comes in the warehouse and says, phone call, there's a person from the probation department on the phone, wants to talk to you. I get on the phone, the probation officer tells me that my wife has been arrested, and she's in the county jail, and this is when her arraignment date is. And I said, what are the charges? Intoxication in public and lewd acts or something in front of a child. Apparently she was on the bus that I put her on and decided to start masturbating on the bus. I go to the arraignment. I'm sitting next to the probation officer, and the probation officer says, don't try to communicate with her when she comes in. My ex-wife comes in. She don't look at the judge. She don't look at the attorneys when they talking to her. She's looking at me, smiling, blowing kisses, smiling ear to ear, saying, I love you, honey, this and that. And I'm just sitting there dumbfounded, like, what the hell is this? The judge looks over at her and says, yes, we have a problem here. I'm going to recommend a psychological evaluation and send the prisoner back to her cell. And we'll have another hearing on such and such date. And I'm like, what the hell happened here? Probation officer tells me that it's my fault. And I'm like, well, how is this my fault that she's acting like that? And she tells me Pamela did not want me to know her criminal history and see her get humbled in front of this judge. I was angry. I was hot about it. And she ended up in a mental state facility for a whole year and a half. And when she came out, she was obese and depressed and sedated. And I remember I brought her home, put her in some clean clothes, and she was not the happy person that I remembered her to be. She was very depressed and irritated. And so, even though we didn't continue to stay together, she did, visit me when she could. And she was always broke and needed money. And she had started getting high again. And this time, it wasn't like before. Now when she would get high, she wasn't interested in dating anybody. She was just interested in being on the street, tweaking. And there would be random days I would run into her and see her and have to remind her who I was, and I'd be giving her some money and she'd just be like, thank you, sir, and go on about her way like she don't even see me. It took me 10 years to realize that what I saw happen that day in that courtroom was a person's attempt to avoid accountability. And I realized that even her in her psychotic state had the amount of intelligence to one had ever shown her that. I understand now that she probably didn't have good memories of being a sober child. And drugs were probably likely the only and most reliable source of joy that she ever had. Now, don't get me wrong, she told me a lot about her life. Raised by a single mother who worked as a bartender, losing custody of her child after something really bad happened, being molested as a child, and the predator not being caught and punished, having siblings with different fathers. She may or may not have graduated high school, didn't have a job for more than 3 months, never married to the father of her child. And she gave her child back to the relatives of the family and never went to go get her again. I met the daughter one time when the daughter was like 16 and had been shot in the eye and lost her eye. As bad as men get condemned for being deadbeats, it's heartbreaking to hear a woman say why she chose not to complete a free drug program to get custody of her child or to regain custody of her child. You have to be in the right place at the right time to hear those kind of stories. A TV reporter is not going to hear those kind of stories. A probation officer is not going to hear those kind of stories. The only people that are going to hear those stories are a person that they trust enough to use narcotics in front of. And when you're homeless, all other homeless people assume that all other homeless people are drug addicts. So even though there's probably 5% of the population is sober and homeless just because they're disenfranchised, everybody that you come in contact with is going to ask you if you know where some dope is, because they're just going to assume, especially if they see you smoking weed or something, they're going to assume that you mess with dope, you on narcotics. If you want to hear the truth about what goes on with women in poverty, I urge you to watch Love Dorsey's YouTube channel. This is the only place you're going to hear the drop-dead truth from a woman's mouth about the life of fornication, adultery, and its consequences. Some of the women that I met in these homeless shelters lost their babies or had their babies taken from them at the hospital right after giving birth. Didn't even get to take the child home. They get ordered to go to a 30-day detox and report back to court. They come back to court and the judge says, I'll give you custody of your child after you complete this 1-year residential rehab facility. And I have met women who decide they're not going to do that. I saw a woman get beat up in the street by her baby daddy because she decided not to go to the drug program because he wasn't visiting her or answering the phone when she was in the 30-day detox. Another woman told me that she wouldn't finish the drug program because she was told her child was being abused, and she's decided to have a relationship with another lesbian while they were in the detox and continued afterwards. The baby was given to the father and stayed with him for 8 years while the mother just prostituted herself on County Street. One woman told me that she gave her child to the father's family because she didn't want the father no more, and she knew if she kept the child, she'd be smoking crack with the child. I met a woman who told me she had 10 babies. She was only 30 years old, and every child was taken away from her at the hospital. Doctors paid her $300 just to tie her tubes. I was invited to see these children or see pictures of these children, and it haunts me to know that enabling them to abandon a child, because I knew what that felt like. I knew what it was like to be raised in a single mother household. I knew what it was like to be abused by her husband. I knew what it was like to be told I'm only here because she couldn't get an abortion. And I'm aware of being seen as a source of shame because I was born out of wedlock. Now, I'm aware that mainstream American media honors the I was tricked into pregnancy theory. And statistics point out that the majority of divorces are initiated by women. Rest in peace. Kevin Samuel's live interview showed that in general, women are the ones who ended the fornicating relationship because he was not faithful or was not pursuing a life with a family. Women fought for the right to end a relationship with a man for any reason, and they got it. Since 1973, God does not decide who gets born. Women do. Man's law gave them the right to kill the unborn child. Critics scoffed at the statistics that show that black women get more racist than all the other minority groups. And it's a known fact in the black community, 70% of black mothers are single and only 1 in 4 will marry. There are myths in our community that keep our culture from progressing. He knocked her up. We made this baby together. I assumed since he didn't wear a condom, he must have wanted me to be pregnant. Or I told him not to come in. In reality, many women make a personal choice not to invest time and energy into female contraceptive. Rather, they put the responsibility on Chivalry and will go so far as to purchase condoms and store condoms. And these are for the man to use on himself. And so it's the one day that she don't have condoms that she conceives a child. When men are pursuing fornication, sex without being married, they're expecting that woman to either be using some type of female contraceptive or have an abortion plan, because that's the safe way to participate in the dating market. If you want to, wait until you're married to be pregnant. Every year, more unwanted children are born. More children are aborted by women that cannot or will not teach daughters how to avoid becoming a single mother. I'm 56 years old and it's still the same excuse. Okay, even though no man can decide for a woman that she should not use female contraceptive. There's more female contraceptive available for women than male contraceptives available for men. Women choose who gets to have sex with them, and men get to choose which ones get married. Kevin Samuels told me that. The decision to risk getting pregnant is not a joint decision. You can talk about it, but it's a decision a woman makes herself that she's going to take this risk. In the teenage community, in the black community, rather, our media does not teach anything about the teenage sexual activity that is prevalent in our community. Children are having sex way too early. Young women are getting pregnant before they even graduate high school with no vision of doing anything else but be a mother on welfare. luckily for me, I didn't have sex until I was 19 because I had a mother, a school teacher mother, who actually took the time to teach me how to discern the difference between a modest, chaste, virtuous young woman and a rebellious, delinquent, promiscuous, disrespectful young woman, or disobedient, wayward daughters. Most black boys and girls born to single mothers do not have anyone to show them the difference between a lady and a hoe. And if their mother was a hoe, she's not going to teach them that there's a difference. And so that young boy is going to grow up, meet other women, and being married to them is never going to cross his mind. He's going to think that he's doing them a favor because they are already a high school dropout, they already sexually active, and they ain't doing nothing with their life. They ain't trying to go to school, they're not trying to go to work, okay? So she knows and he knows he's eventually going to get busted. Drugs or some kind of violent gangbanging stuff. If she's going to get Section 8 housing, okay? There's no oversight. There's nobody making sure she doesn't have boyfriends and living at the house. There's nobody to encourage her or stop her from having, children from different men, not marrying them and still being on welfare. People that need help growing up are being ignored. My life as an unhoused to housed person has shown me how the next generation of homeless drug addicts is created. I can't put all the blame on nonprofits, organizations, but the ones that provide housing and employment for people exiting incarceration or single parents who no longer receive welfare because the child is in kindergarten, they're not teaching anyone how to avoid homelessness. Rather, they maintain employment that does not require skill development. So people can never get a job working in the public sector, in the commercial world. The clerks have fancy titles, but they're only doing work an 11th grader can do. The harm reduction movement replaces the word consequence with harm. And so if you're using this, you're not holding anyone accountable for bad decisions they're making at work, poor judgment, or being intoxicated at work. There's no accountability. The buck gets passed over and over and over. Harm reduction is not about reducing drug use. It's about reducing the harmful impacts of negative consequences of being convicted and sent to jail or put on probation, as if those effects aren't put there to teach you how to have self-control. You have to want to have self-control. No doctor can cure mental illness and disobedience. Only the person can. No medicine can make you do that. We have nonprofits here in San Francisco that actually provide paraphernalia for people to use their narcotics with. And the drugs are getting stronger by the day to the point where even Narcan can't get a person to stop using drugs. When I was a desk clerk, I got fed up with calling the paramedics to revive people on fentanyl. And they would get up out of those paramedic vans and go right back to the person who sold them dope. And when they would see me, they couldn't even look me in the eye. Couldn't even say thank you for saving my life. And I stopped doing it at desk clerk work. I said, these people aren't accidentally killing themselves. They want to die slowly, and they have found a drug that kills them softly, gives them the euphoria they want. And if you really think about it logically, they want to be happy when they take their last breath. And when they're on that drug, they're happy because they're not thinking about anything they've done wrong. They're not feeling any guilt. They're completely, their mind is not even in their control. And that's what's really going on. Here in this building that I live in, this is a building where people that were formerly in a drug program, maybe they're coming from jail, maybe they're coming from the hospital, or maybe you're coming from like a homeless shelter like I did. And so there's a lot of drug activity, illegal drug activity going on here because the police are not allowed to conduct any narcotics investigations here. Every floor has fentanyl, crack, meth dealers. You got people who are just visitors staying here month to month without paying rent. Folks, the unwillingness to acknowledge truth prevents a solution to problems. The person who studies the origin of thought seeks to make a change. The person who chooses effect over cause, they stay trapped in a cycle that kills the body and the soul sooner than natural life. The ignorance of truth is not exclusive to the poor. The spectrum includes the ego of people who have no experience being homeless, making policies and protocols that never enhance or upgrade. Homeless people with depression and drug addictions are just cattle in order to make income from the tenderloin nonprofits. One has to learn how to ignore and endure narcissism for 10 hours a day, smelling smoke and urine, seeing feces, smelling drugs and alcohol, seeing injuries, seeing psychosis, observing overdose and death, being yelled at, cursed at, assaulted, stalked, seeing fights, dogs off leashes, sound pollution from loud profanity-laced rap songs, solicitation, bribes, narcotic drug use, right in front of you. Just like the drug dealers, one has to convince themselves that they are doing themselves a favor. There's an epidemic of ignorance that persists. Thank you for your time. Hope to talk to you soon. Deuces. Peace.